Chapter 18. The Ethereal Realm and Zero Space. Alina took a moment to center herself, drawing upon her experiences at Golgotha, the Cosmic Cross, the Tomb, and the Golden Gated Garden. She recalled the sensation of boundless expansiveness, of transcendental consciousness, and the profound realization that everything was interconnected, that God is all in all. A wave of serenity washed over her as she felt this relief of responsibility, and with it her consciousness expanding in all directions, upwards and downwards, forwards and backwards, left and right, creating a profound sense of being anchored within an infinite expanse filled with pure awareness. The weight of her physical presence dissolved, allowing the essence of her existence to permeate all things. The boundaries between herself and the world around her were blurred, as if she was one with everything. Gradually, she became aware of a cool, gentle breeze caressing her cheeks, carrying the faint scent of dry and rocky earth. With a sudden jolt, her consciousness shifted, and she found herself standing on a desolate landscape surrounded by muted silver light and heavy clouds looming ominously in the sky above. The ground beneath her feet was hard and icy cold, sending chills up her spine. A subtle silvery mist wrapped around her ankles as it crept along the cracked ground. In the distance, she beheld a towering rocky hillside, its peaks shrouded in mist. Determination sparked within her, and she set forth towards the imposing hill to gain a better vantage point. Casting a glance behind her at the desolate desert plain stretching endlessly into the horizon, Alina's heart raced with a mix of excitement and determination. With each step closer to the looming hill, she could feel the pull of adventure growing stronger and stronger. The cold, jagged rocks tore at Alina's worn hands and feet as she scaled the steep hill. She gritted her teeth against the frigid air, determined to reach the summit. As she finally climbed over the top, a lifeless landscape stretched out before her, a vast expanse of gnarled black trees with no signs of life. In the distance, craggy mountains loomed like ghostly apparitions against the drab, colorless sky. Collapsing onto a large boulder, Alina caught her breath and surveyed the barren terrain. She noted every detail, memorizing the landscape before beginning her descent into the sinister forest below. The dead branches scraped and clawed at her dirty, cold skin as she trudged through the lifeless trees. The silver mist swirled around her torn and aching feet once again, adding to her growing exhaustion. Frustration and fear began to set in as Alina trekked deeper into the dark forest. Desperate for any sign of life, she called out into the silence, only to be met with the sound of twigs snapping underfoot. Taking a moment to lean against a barkless tree, its sharp trunk digging into her back, Alina took a deep breath to steady herself. But then, through the eerie stillness, she heard it, a muffled voice coming from just ahead. Her heart pounding with hope and uncertainty, she raced towards the source of the sound. Whoever or whatever was out there, Alina was determined to find them. In the midst of the dead forest, Alina finally stumbled upon a small campfire. It crackled and sputtered, its pale blue glow struggling to penetrate the dark shadows that surrounded it. The musty stench of decay, mixed with the smell of campfire smoke, filled the frigid air. Twisted and gnarled trees surrounded the clearing, their branches reaching out like bony fingers in an eerie embrace. On the edge of the glade loomed a tall carriage, elevated about 14 feet off the ground on sturdy wooden wheels. The back wheels were massive, while the front ones were significantly smaller, giving the impression of a tilted axis. 4 rickety wooden steps led up to the main compartment, a combination of brass and wood that exuded an air of faded grandeur. The carriage was adorned with various sized windows, some square and neatly framed with bronze trim, others round and reminiscent of portholes on a ship, and still others rectangular and slightly crooked in their placement. At the front of the carriage stood a cylindrical chamber, its tall windows catching the flickering blue light from the fire. 2 large, round spotlights, also made of bronze, perched on top like watchful sentinels, their harsh beams piercing into the surrounding darkness. And at the back of the carriage were 4 cylindrical cages, resembling antique bird cages, but much larger in size. One of these cages held a small gnome creature, no taller than a toddler, brimming with a youthful energy despite his weathered face. His pointed ears peeked out from under a crumpled brown hat, and a twig jutted out from its side like a makeshift feather. A large, bulbous nose dominated his hairless upper lip, while a thick white beard cascaded down his rosy cheeks. His thin frame was draped in an olive-green jacket embellished with intricate patterns, while his twig-like legs were clad in deep green pants held up by a sturdy brown belt with a polished brass buckle. At the end of his long, slender legs were pointy boots crafted from soft, supple material. Though Wilfor had the appearance of a sprightly young man, he was, in actuality, 125 years old. Across from him, in the second cage, sat a smaller creature, a sylph. Bink was a delicate being adorned with an elegant citron-yellow dress that appeared to be an extension of her ethereal form. Her skin was nearly translucent, giving off a subtle glow. Sprouting from her back were 4 intricate wings, each glistening with a hue of light blue that danced like oil in water. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves, framing her delicate and exquisitely beautiful features. Trembling with fear, Bink's voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm scared, Wilfor. What do you think she'll do to us? Wilfor's eyes burned with determination as he reached his arm through the cold bronze bars and clasped Bink's trembling hand tightly in his own. I won't let anything bad happen to you, I promise, he declared fiercely. But their moment of solace was shattered when Alina suddenly emerged from the shadows of the tree line, standing under their cages and looking up at them with curiosity and confusion. A sharp jolt of terror shot through Wilfor and Bink as they realized a human had stumbled upon their imprisonment. "Gazooks!" Wilfor exclaimed, causing both Alina and Bink to jump in surprise. Fear etched deep lines on their faces as they awaited Alina's reaction. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Wilfor demanded in an aggressive whisper. "I was going to ask you guys the same thing," Alina replied, her interest piqued by the sight of actual elementals trapped before her. "You shouldn't be here," Bink whispered, her eyes darting around the dark forest. "They'll be back any minute now." "Who's coming back?" she asked innocently. "Oris and Boris," Wilfor hissed, urgently scanning the area for any signs of movement. "They're the ones who put us in here." Bink's panicked expression spoke volumes as she added, "Get out of here before they catch you too." But it was too late. A thick, knotted net suddenly flew through the air, entangling Alina completely, trapping her in its merciless grasp. She thrashed and fought against it, but to no avail. All 3 of them were now at the mercy of their captors. The sound of heavy breathing and approaching footsteps echoed through the night forest, the crunching of leaves and twigs under their captors' feet growing louder and closer as Horace and Boris closed in on their prey. Alina got a pungent odor of rotten onions, stale tobacco, and stale breath before she managed to flip over onto her back ready to face her attackers, but before she could do anything, the wooden stock of a gun crashed into her face with a brutal force, pain exploding through her skull as her vision blurred and faded. As she succumbed to unconsciousness, Alina knew she was at the mercy of Horace and Boris in the dark, unforgiving depths of the night forest. Solomon's hands trembled as he meticulously packed the necessary supplies into Rachel's backpack. The weight of the bag felt like a heavy burden, pressing against his heart and reminding him of the impending danger they faced. With every zip and buckle, he felt a surge of determination course through his veins. Finally, he handed the bag to his wife, their fingers lingering together for a brief moment before reluctantly letting go. They stood face to face, tears threatening to spill from their eyes. In this shared moment of sadness, they held on to each other, seeking solace in their love and strength. "I promise I'll bring Isaac back," Solomon vowed to Rachel, his voice trembling with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she gazed at him with unwavering love and faith despite the doubts that lingered in her own mind. She leaned in and pressed her lips passionately against his, pouring all her love and hope into the kiss. They held each other tightly, not wanting to let go, until finally Rachel turned and walked out of the lobby and onto Main Street in the direction of Big Mountain Shelter. Solomon remained standing at the entrance, watching as families bid farewell and left one by one, following Rachel towards safety. His heart weighed heavy with sorrow and fear for their uncertain future, but above all else, he knew he had a mission to fulfill and a son to save. Rupert and Cornelia stood by his side, offering understanding smiles to the departing families. As the last group left, Solomon closed the front entrance behind them with a heavy sigh. He couldn't help but wonder if it would be the last time he would see any of them. The weight of their absence settled heavily on his shoulders. But he couldn't afford to dwell on that now. He had a purpose to fulfill and a son counting on him. With a heavy heart but unyielding determination, Solomon turned and walked back inside. The lobby now echoed an eerie emptiness, mirroring Solomon's own desolate heart. Each departing family was a fragment of his world slipping away into the unknown. Only time would tell if they would ever reunite again. Krishna strode into the lab, his trident in hand. The air was tense with anticipation as he approached Solomon, Rupert, and Cornelius. "Right then." Krishna's voice rang out with fresh resolve. "Alina is in, and time is ticking for your son." He picked up the Nix device and motioned for Solomon to take a seat in a metal chair by the desk. With slow, deliberate movements, Krishna came to stand behind him, his gaze shifting between Rupert and Cornelius, who stood on either side of the room. "You know what to do," he stated firmly. Rupert and Cornelius gave a sharp nod of affirmation before exiting the lab. Krishna turned his attention back to Solomon, who sat in the chair with his head slightly tilted back. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked, his tone low and serious. "Like you said, the clock's ticking," Solomon replied coldly. Without hesitation, Krishna lifted the Nix device and aimed it at the back of Solomon's head. With a short stab and high-pitched hiss, he shot the chip into the base of Solomon's skull. The room fell silent as they waited for Nix to start interfacing with Solomon's neural network. After a few moments, a stereoscopic image materialized in zero space before him. The holographic projection of a woman appeared, her features sharp and lifelike. Her voice was light and cheerful as she greeted him. "Hello, thank you for choosing Nix," she said, her words carrying a hint of pride. "The world's only augmented reality smart brain computer interface." Solomon couldn't help but be enthralled by the impressive technology, feeling a sense of wonder wash over him. For a brief moment he allowed himself to indulge in his inner nerd, forgetting the gravity of his mission as he turned to Krishna with a bright smile. But Krishna's cocked eyebrow expression brought him back to reality. The hologram continued on. "Unfortunately, this Nix device doesn't seem to be registered. Let's go ahead and set up your profile so you'll be free to utilize all the features Nix has to offer." The hologram continued its projection, emitting a soft blue glow in the dimly lit lab. A small rectangular pop-up box materialized at Nix's right side, displaying the prompt, "Create a profile," in bold letters. "Alright, let's see," Solomon murmured to himself with a determined expression, his fingers deftly navigating through the air as if playing an invisible piano. With a flick of his wrist, he swiped away the registration prompt and dove into the complex control panel of the operating system. With a mind like a steel trap and years of experience behind him, Solomon delved into the intricate code that powered the interface. He manipulated strings of data with ease, effortlessly navigating through endless constellations of information that lay hidden in dimensional intersections. Through advanced neurovisual nanoparticles embedded in his brain, he issued precise electrical impulses that directed the lines of code to do his bidding. As he worked, a virtual web began to take shape before him, an architectural structure of digital pathways that allowed him to visualize, file, and access encrypted codes within Nix's operating systems. It was like constructing a skyscraper made entirely out of information and data, each floor representing a different layer of information waiting to be accessed. With each passing second, Solomon's cybernetic matrix grew stronger and more intricate, resembling a digital optical sensor superhighway that he could navigate through at lightning speed. In just a few minutes, Solomon had created a powerful tool, his very own holographic web of interconnected and encrypted systems, that would allow him to manipulate and access Nix's system with unparalleled efficiency and precision while simultaneously offering layers of protection to himself. Farah, a young, ambitious tech whiz, sat in front of her own Nix interface, a holographic screen displaying real-time data on all government surveillance and control systems. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on her transparent tablet as she scanned through neural maps and users' behaviors, searching for any weakness or vulnerabilities in the system. Suddenly, an alert beeped on her display. She leaned in, analyzing the flashing red dot on the map of Pennsylvania. Not sure what to make of it, she made her way to Branton's office. As well as being the officer of the East and ruler of Peralda, the elemental king of air, he was the CTO of Hegemon's Nix subsidiary. He sat at the edge of a long marble conference table. Behind him towered a large LCD screen showing the latest stats on Nix. Farah came to stand in the doorway of his conference room. Branton, noticing her worried expression, motioned for her to enter. "An unauthorized device seems to have been activated in the ruins of Bethlehem, sir," she said, motioning to the red dot on the display map. "Bethlehem, Pennsylvania?" he responded, confused. "How is that possible?" "Not sure, sir." The visibly stressed employee replied, "I can immediately terminate their access and shut down any connections to our database. We have intel that suggests this individual is attempting to breach our systems." "Do we know their motive yet?" Branton asked, remembering that the raid Eliphaz conducted was in that exact same area. The two had to be linked, Branton realized. Not yet, sir. They seem to be only accessing operational systems at the moment, but no damage has been done. After a brief moment of contemplation, Branton spoke decisively. Leave them be for now. We have their location and can shut them down if necessary, but let's observe their actions first. Yes, sir. I'll inform the team and keep you updated on their activity. As he watched her leave, Branton's mind raced with possibilities. Who could this intruder be? But he knew he had to handle it carefully or risk losing Azoth's trust in his ability to keep the powerful Nyx system under control. As evening fell, the city's consumers began to settle in for the night, blinding the eyes of reality and turning into one of the infinite virtual realities of their choosing, ready to put their feet up and suck on the cyberslag that momentarily gave their hungry ghosts a sense of belonging. Rich, poor, educated, non-educated, all wrapped up in the net, the luminous grid from which they built their holographic souls. Cutting through the psychosphere of their black mass hallucinations was the monotone beep of an Amber Alert warning. A small amber box scrolled across the bottom of everyone's zero-space projections, reading, "Incoming emergency alert from Hegemon Inc." People quickly swiped off their indulgence and awaited this unprecedented interruption. Fading into the vision of every Nyx host stood Azoth in his regular three-piece suit. Apologies for the interruption, but we have to inform you that we have just prevented a terrorist attack from a domestic terrorist organization that was planning to bring down Hegemon Inc. systems, which, as you know, would bring societal collapse and potentially endanger countless lives. Fortunately, we have managed to apprehend the leader of this terrorist organization before they can carry out their plan. In zero space next to Azoth appeared the holographic projection of Isaac, dressed in a white jumpsuit and handcuffed, looking dirty and disheveled. A surge of anger and grief overtook Solomon as he saw his innocent son being paraded in front of millions as a terrorist. As punishment for his crimes and to ensure that this never happens again, Azoth continued, we at Hegemon believe that the death penalty is the only appropriate sentence. Otherwise, we promise this group will attempt to infiltrate Hegemon's network systems again. Solomon's hands curled into tight fists until his knuckles turned white. However, in light of our love and respect for all citizens and our commitment to protect our way of life, we are giving you the privilege to act as juror and choose his fate. Solomon's mind raced with images of his son, scared, alone, vulnerable, held by dangerous people who wanted him dead. A fiery mix of sorrow and rage ignited within him, clawing its way up his chest and constricting his throat. In a moment of understanding, Krishna placed a gentle hand on Solomon's shoulder, knowing that Azoth's plan was now in motion and there was no turning back. All citizens who have joined Nyx will have the opportunity to vote death penalty or life imprisonment. As Azoth spoke, two small boxes appeared on the right side of everyone's vision. The top read death penalty, while the bottom one displayed life imprisonment. A timer beneath them indicated that they only had 24 hours to make their decision. We understand that this is a difficult choice, but we trust for the safety and security of all, you will make the right decision. Thank you, and please continue enjoying your Nyx experience. With those final words, Azoth faded from zero space, leaving behind the two voting options as a constant reminder to all citizens. Alina's head throbbed, the pain pulsing through her skull as she tried to focus her eyes. Slowly, she became aware of her surroundings. Her body was cramped and uncomfortable in a small cage, barely fitting due to her human size compared to her companions Wilfor and Bink, who were frozen and silent in their own cages. The smell of rotten onions and stale tobacco filled her nostrils once again, causing her to gag. She peered down to find the source, only to see two peculiar men staring back up at her. One was short and round, with a bulging potbelly and stocky legs covered in saggy brown pants stained with God knows what. His upper body was bristly and greasy, exposed other than some straps acting as makeshift suspenders. A self-satisfied smirk adorned his plump face, revealing sparse, rotted teeth gripping a stubby cigar. In his right hand was a mortar pistol, the device that had shot the net that ensnared them. The taller man next to him appeared like a stick insect, thin and lean. He too was dressed similarly, with a long, torn-up leather jacket trailing on the ground behind him. A slender tobacco pipe hung from his thin, slithery lips as he spoke. "Not a bad catch this time, Boris," Horace said while puffing his pipe. Boris proudly adjusted his suspenders. "A sylph, a gnome, and an human all in one go? We've hit the jackpot," Boris said with a smug grin. "Excellent work, my dear Boris," the tall one replied with a nod and a wink. "This will surely put us back in the Queen's good books. Indeed it will, good sir, Boris agreed. Alina held her nose, desperately trying not to breathe the foul stench emanating from these repugnant men as they gloated over their capture. Alina gave a slight wave to the two men. Excuse me, I'm not sure what's going on here, but you don't have the right to just capture us. Is there some kind of deal we can make where you can free us? Bink and Wilfor gave each other a dire look at Alina's ignorance. The only deal we're doing is with the Queen for your skin, little lady, Boris said with a nudge to Horace. The two shared a wheezy chuckle. Horace's expression turned curious as he examined Alina a little closer. What you doing in the wilderness of mortal thought anyhow? We ain't seen an human out here for donkey's years, Boris chimed in. Only the elemental folk come out these parts. The rest of your kind stick to the kingdom. Alina started cottoning on, thinking quickly. Well, that's why I'm here. I was sent by the Queen to come find you two. Not taking his eyes off Alina, Boris spat out a thick yellow wad of saliva onto the ground, wiping the dribbles of its remnants off his chin. You know what I think? I think you're telling porcupines, little miss. A large grin split across Horace's face. Let's take her to the Queen and see if she's telling the truth, shall we, Boris? Oh, yes, we shall, my good Horace. With that, Boris pulled an enormous set of brass keys from his thick belt and jangled them with his chubby little fingers in front of their captors. Enough chitty-chatting, time to get us some shrapnel, Horace. The two headed toward the front of the carriage, waving their grubby hands in a mocking expression. Toodaloo, me pretties, Horace said as the two boarded their carriage. With a spit, a tut, and a spurt, the carriage engine roared to life as Horace and Boris sat at the steering wheel inside. Meanwhile, Bink, Wilfor, and Alina were stuck in cages dangling off the back of the carriage, swaying and bouncing over the uneven terrain of the wilderness of mortal thought. Black smoke billowed out of the tall, skinny chimneys on top of the carriage, leaving behind a trail of toxic smog in the frigid night air. The sound of metal grinding against metal filled their ears as they trudged along through the darkness. The haunting melody of Boris's whistling filled the early morning air as their carriage emerged from the skeletal remains of the forest, venturing further into the wilderness of mortal thought. After a grueling night journey traversing the uneven wilderness, Alina felt a wave of nausea washing over her. The carriage jolted and swayed with each gnarled root and hidden rock, amplifying her discomfort. They had finally left behind the desolate woods and now faced a vast expanse of barren desert. The frigid, arid atmosphere seemed to snatch away their moisture, leaving them gasping for breath and shivering in their thin garments. The cracked earth extended towards the ghostly silhouette of a grand mountain, whose jagged peaks pierced the distant sky. Wilfor appeared disheveled in his cage, every wrinkle on his face deepened by fatigue. Even Bink's lively spirit seemed drained as she sat, lost in thought. Alina's stomach released an audacious growl. She hadn't had any sustenance since yesterday. She shifted uneasily in the cramped cage that was meant for elementals, not for humans, her legs protesting against the constant discomfort. Breaking the heavy silence, Wilfor spoke up with a raspy voice. So, where do you come from, then? Bink perked up, eager to hear the answer herself. Alina hesitated before answering. Well, to be honest, I'm from Earth. Wilfor let out a loud guff, joined by the light hum of laughter from Bink. We're all from Earth, love. Which realm of Earth are you referring to? Alina didn't know how to answer this question. The physical one? Ah, lovely, Wilfor said with a satisfied nod. May I ask what the heck you're doing here in the ethereal realm, then? It's been ages since anyone from the physical realm has ventured into these parts. I apologize for my ignorance, Alina began tentatively. But you're a gnome, correct? Wilfor straightened up proudly and declared, Not just any gnome, I am a dryad, keeper of trees and forests. Alina turned her attention to Bink and asked, Then you must be a sylph? Bink nodded with a bright smile. That's right, she said definitely. Alina continued on with her explanation. I've been sent here to help you all so that you can help us. Bink and Wilfor exchanged skeptical glances before Wilfor spoke up. And how do you plan on helping us, love? You're stuck in the same cage as we are. Bink couldn't help but laugh at the irony of their situation and quickly covered her mouth. Alina's face remained serious as she began to explain her mission. Well, Alina started, this queen and kingdom that we're being taken to. I have a feeling I'm supposed to overthrow them or put a stop to their actions. I'm not entirely sure yet. Wilfor scoffed. Well, that sounds extremely reassuring. It seems like your trip here was a waste of time, my love. Alina took a deep breath before continuing with her explanation. Back on Earth, I mean the physical realm, There's a black magician named Azoth who has imprisoned the 4 elemental kings. Wilfor and Bink exchanged surprised glances at this information. Wilfor urged her to continue. Go on. I'm here to get you all to try to help us to fight against Azoth and free the elemental kings so we can restore order to all of the realms. Bink nodded thoughtfully as she added, Azoth is the reason why us elementals started warring with each other. Once we lost our kings, our kingdoms fell apart. It wasn't just war between different types of elementals, we were also fighting amongst ourselves. Yeah, Wilfor chimed in grimly. Us gnomes, sylph, undars, and salamanders all broke off into separate tribes and refused to come to any sort of agreement. As a result, Ethereum has suffered greatly ever since. Bink added with tears welling up in her eyes. Azoth has also planted black magicians in every human kingdom, poisoning their minds and causing them to use and abuse us like slaves. Alina asked curiously, So who are Horus and Boris in all this then? Wilfor's expression turned to one of disgust. They're bounty hunters on their way to sell us to the Veiled Queen. Veiled Queen? Alina repeated, intrigued by this new piece of information. Yeah, probably the nastiest queen in Ethereum, Bink spat, her fist clenching. Other realms turn a blind eye, but she gets her kicks hunting us down, makes us dance like puppets in her twisted little show. She let out a bitter laugh. Horus and Boris, those dimwit lackeys of hers, finally struck gold with us. Bet they're feeling real proud of themselves right now. How did they find you? Alina asked. Well, to be completely honest, Wilfor began, his eyes sparkling as he looked at Bink, elementals don't usually mix. They especially don't fall in love. But when we met, we just knew there was something special between us. We decided to meet in the Dead Forest thinking it'd be safe since no elementals or humans ever go there. But I guess we were wrong. Bink's expression softened as she gazed lovingly at Wilfor, filled with compassion. We just need to make sure the Queen doesn't catch wind of our relationship, otherwise her sick mind will come up with something especially nasty for us, Bink said, her voice trembling. Alina's warm smile radiated reassurance, and she spoke, Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. We'll get through this together. Wilfor and Bink felt a sense of release wash over them, grateful for the understanding and support of their new companion. The trio formed an instant bond as they traversed the cracked, cold desert plains toward the looming mountains in the distance. As they rode on in the carriage, Alina shared stories about her own friends, while Bink and Wilfor opened up about their own loved ones. But amidst the light-hearted conversation, Alina also revealed details about Nyx, Isaac's execution, and the summoning of Ahriman, a name that struck fear into their hearts. For they knew all too well that he was the one thing that could destroy the elemental realm forever. With this shared knowledge and understanding, their bond grew stronger with each passing mile. They were no longer just strangers thrown together by circumstance, but allies united against a common enemy.